Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to the Learning Disabilities, How Parents and Teachers Can Promote Academic Success Through Parent Participation workshop. My name is Deja Wargo-Cole and I will be the facilitator of this workshop. So we're going to go over the objectives that we have today. These are going to be the goals that we intend to meet by the end of this workshop. So by the conclusion of this workshop, participants will understand the eligibility requirements of Section 504 plans and individualized education programs as specified in Clark County School District standards. They will also understand the spectrums of disabilities and how those spectrums impact learning. They will encourage and facilitate family involvement in identifying and utilizing resources to meet the needs related to the child's disability. And they will also collaborate and effectively build powerful and trusting family service provider relationships. Okay, so first we are going to essentially define what it means to have a disability under IDEA. Now, we'll get into this a little bit later, but this is going to, this law is specifically going to relate to IEPs, and we will go over what exactly IEPs are in the upcoming slides. So IDEA, it's a federal law that requires schools to serve the educational needs of a child with a disability. Schools are obligated by this law to identify and evaluate students who are suspected of having disability, and this can be done through various comprehensive analysis procedures, evaluations being cognitive evaluations, and it'll go over specifically different types of mediums which a child can display his or her need of educational needs and assistance. And this is provided at no cost to parents. So the 13 categories of disability range, it starts from autism, deafness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, and this includes ADHD and other behavioral disabilities. It just depends on a case-by-case basis. Specific learning disabilities such as dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and again, other specific learning disabilities could be covered under IDEA just on a case-by-case basis depending on the severity of the disability. Speech and language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment, including blindness. Now, what is important to know about services that fall under IDEA, they are very strict, and there are other services that are available that do not have such strict guidelines, and we will go over that in just a moment. But we're going to talk about the qualifications and what academic services are available to students and individuals who have one or more of those 13 disabilities that are defined under IDEA. As being eligible for services. So to obtain eligibility for services under IDEA, the student must possess one of the 13 disabilities recognized under IDEA. However, this does not automatically qualify a child for services. A child must display the need for services under IDEA in order to progress in school. Now, what this means is that the student must display that they have a genuine need for services in order to be able to benefit from the educational environment. So if, let's say, the child does have one of these 13 disabilities, but maybe it's not as severe, or maybe it doesn't impede their learning in an immense way, they may not be qualified for these services. So if the child requires special services under IDEA, parents will collaborate with school staff to develop an individualized education program, and that is what an IEP is. If the child is denied services, they may still be eligible for reasonable accommodations under the Section 504 plan. Now, we'll talk about this in a little bit, actually on the next slide. But when we are referring to IEPs and Section 504 plans, they are covered under different laws. Now, IEP programs are specifically to establish a program with which the child receives services and their education is altered in such a way that makes learning possible for them. And these are usually for more extreme cases. Section 504 plans are usually just accommodations. They don't have to be so drastic, and they don't have to be specific. They can vary amongst a wide range of spectrums, as well as the participants. Those also vary as well. So a couple of differences that help kind of differentiate what IEPs are versus what Section 504 plans are. So IEPs, it's a plan for a child's special education services at school. These are actually special education implementations that a child needs to be able to participate in school. In Section 504 plans, contrary, it's a plan of how the child will have access to learning in school, or accommodations, a plan for how the child will receive accommodations to help them in school. IEPs provide individualized special education services to meet the unique needs of the child, whereas Section 504 plans provide services and accommodations to the learning environment to meet the needs of the child in order to place them at the same level as their peers. So a lot of times, students who have an IEP, they will not reach that level of cognitive understanding as their peers at the same level. So they have to have a completely individualized plan and accommodations in order to meet them where they're at and continue to foster a learning environment for them that is appropriate and reasonable for the level they are currently at. Whereas Section 504 plans, they provide accommodations to level the playing field, in so many words, of students who have the Section 504 plan and their peers. Two different laws apply with these different plans. So IDEA applies for IEPs, which you just talked about. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 applies for Section 504 plans. So that name's going to be a lot easier to remember. Now, under IEPs, the guidelines are very strict. So your child has to possess one or more of the 13 disabilities listed under IDEA. And it must affect their academic performance or their ability to learn from the general education curriculum. That is a requirement. Now, under 504 plans, they're not as specific. A child can actually have a wide variety, in fact, any disability, in order to be eligible. But they have to also prove that the child's ability to learn in a general education classroom will be hindered without certain accommodations. Under IEPs, there is a strict list of participants. So within this list of participants, you will have the teacher, you'll have the special education provider, you'll have the principal, you'll have other administrators, you'll have sometimes paraprofessionals, you'll also have maybe physicians or doctors that the child works with regularly. And these strict list of participants have to be present, especially the principal. So for Section 504 plans, the rules on the 504 plans are less specific. Of course, for both plans, you're going to need the parent involvement. The parents have to be present in order for you to conduct these plans. But anything other than that, you might have the the special education teacher and the general education teacher, but everything else is completely up to your discretion as to, or the parent's discretion as to who they decide to include in the process. IEPs, you have to have written documentation that explicitly explains the plans that you intend to take and the protocol that you intend to take to ensure that the child is receiving the necessary accommodations that they need. And we're actually going to go over that in just a moment. I have an example that we will use, and it'll be an activity. We'll go over it and go step by step as to what is included in an IEP. Section 504 plans do not always have to be a written document. It just has to be agreed upon between the parent, the teacher, and of course approved by the school. As long as it's reasonable, there usually isn't any problems with incorporating a Section 504 plan, but again, it does have to be reasonable. IEPs are reviewed at least once per year, and there are actually different evaluations that occur throughout the year, which we'll get into, that just ensure that the child is progressing in a way that's expressed in the IEP. Section 504 plans are reviewed once every 3 years, or really just when needed, really when there needs to be an alteration, or if a parent feels that the Section 504 plan needs to be revisited for a specific reason. Maybe the child's needs have changed, maybe they've increased in severity. There are occasions where it may decrease in severity. So those are not so strict as to when they need to be reviewed, and they're reviewed much less often than IEP. So I'm going to stop the presentation here just for a moment, and we're actually going to look at a sample of a IEP. And this is actually going to be a very, very detailed look at what exactly you can expect when you see an IEP form that's in front of you, and what to expect when you review it over the IEP or the parent-teacher meetings regarding the IEP. So for this, I used Dennis the Menace, and this is essentially what your beginning page is going to look like. Again, these IEPs are structured immensely, so you will be looking at basically just the student parent information on the front, what exactly their learning disability is, or what exactly their disability is, and then what type of IEP they need. Is this their first IEP? Is this going to be a reoccurring IEP? Is this, an IEP that follows a 3-year evaluation? Is this an IEP that was at the parent's request? That will be listed under the meeting information. So this information here under IEP participation is going to be signed off by who is participating in the IEP meeting. So you'll have, you could have the counselor, the special education teacher, you'll have a representative that maybe the parents request being there, an interpreter just in case you have parents whose first language might not be English. And we have the procedural safeguards. This will be checked off by parents who may not speak English as their primary language. And then we're going to go over to the next page. Now, these are going to be what exactly the plans are, what the assessments are, what the teacher has observed, different evaluations that I discussed previously that do take place when students are being evaluated and considered for IEP programs. So, for example, at the top you'll have the assessments conducted. You'll then have the assessment results as to what was found when these assessments were put in place. And then you'll have the effects. So, for example, under the STAR assessment, you'll have the different things like reading, literacy, math, writing. And then it'll say something like, this student scored greater than 20% of students on a national average in the same grade. His test performance is comparable to that of an average kindergartner. After the 6th month of the school year, he would be best served by instructional materials prepared at the pre-kindergarten level. So again, we are talking about Dennis, who is in 1st grade. So he is reading below the average reading level for someone his age. Again, you do the same for math, you do the same for writing, and then of course the regular education teacher will display their observations and what they found in interacting with the student on a regular basis. You'll also always take parent input at these meetings. Now, don't worry, you're never going to have to, I don't want to say never, you're usually not going to have to construct all of this by yourself. This entire IEP program will usually be done by the time you walk into the IEP meeting. You just have to provide your statements and what you feel is best for the situation in terms of student capabilities and what their ultimate goal is quarterly and annually. And again, we just have more assessments that are conducted, the progress that he's made, and then towards the end, you're going to have a statement of student strengths, what you're concerned with, what the parents are concerned with, and then you're also going to take a statement from, what Dennis or a student you're working with likes to do, and this can be as nothing academic related. You're just looking for something that the student is interested in. And the reason that we do that is because sometimes the student can provide information in which the teacher can incorporate into their curriculum to make the information interesting for the student. And many times this is even relevant for students who do not have a disability. When a student is more interested in the topic, they are more likely to learn. And this is imperative for students who may have a disability. And then underneath that, you'll always have a consideration of special factors. So does the student's behavior impede the student's learning environment or the learning environment of others? And it'll always say yes, address an IEP, or no action needed if it's not relevant to that student. And you're going to have short-term and long-term goals, as well as academic and functional goals that are always going to be relevant in your IEP program. And so you're going to set out a specific goal that you want to achieve quarterly, and then a specific goal that you want to achieve annually. So you're going to have these measurable annual goals, and it looks something like this. So we have Dennis, who has a speech goal here, and it says, by annual review date in the speech room, Dennis will produce vocalic are in single words at 80% accuracy as measured by observation and documentation and as implemented by the speech and language pathologist. So it gives a clear explanation of what Dennis's goals are going to be by the next time that this IEP is reviewed. And then it has short-term goals, and these are like little benchmark goals. It's just to evaluate where Dennis is at by the time these quarterly goals, or by the time these quarterly deadlines come around. So they get evaluated. Is Dennis progressing at the rate that we believed he would in the IEP? If not, we need to revisit this IEP and make necessary adjustments. And again, this is not just, specifically related to classroom academics. This is also related to behavioral issues, social development, things related to occupational therapy that will be addressed by an occupational therapist and what they believe Dennis, I do not know why I keep saying Devin, I apologize, what Dennis is, or the student that you're working with, what their benchmark is going to be. And again, it's just continued for as long or however many different areas of learning and different areas of interest are. And then you have the special education services um, that you and others believe will benefit Dennis or the student that you're working with. So you will have a certain time frame of which the student will partake in these services, when the beginning and end date of these services will take place, and where they will be located. And then you will have supplementary aids and services. So you'll just have slight modifications and accommodations that you intend to make in order to foster Dennis's or the student that you're working with their success in school. You will have related services where it'll be checked what supplementary services Dennis or the student you're working with needs in order to progress in entirely in both the academic and functional realm. Um, in both the academic and functional realm. So also, there will be a section where it will ask, or where you will need to talk about if the student will participate in standardized tests, if they're capable and cognitively able to participate in those tests, and if so, if there will need to be any accommodations and what those accommodations are. There's also the option for extended school year services. If the student needs to have extra time in school in order to progress to where they need to be, that will be addressed in that section. And then placement considerations, it just means where the student is going to be placed and where they will spend the majority of their time. And of course, if the student is not going to partake in regular general ed classes most of the time, then you need to justify exactly why that is. Now, the reason why this usually needs to be justified is because it is practice that the student, if they do have a disability, or students in general, they be placed in the least restrictive environment as possible. So if the student can and is able and has the means to, and we have the means to, usually at all times we want them to participate in general education services as much as possible. If that's not possible if that's not possible with their condition, then we need to explain why. And that is very, very important. So if they're not going to partake or spend much time inside a general education classroom, we need to be letting the parents and the faculty, administration know exactly why that is. So, the reason why understanding IEPs is so important and why you need to be familiar with them, because it's a lot of information and it can get confusing, especially for parents and even for educators. And we need to be familiar with these types of programs so that when we are approached by a parent with questions, in order to foster that positive relationship, that working relationship, we need to be able to provide as much information that we have on this matter. If we don't have that information, we need to be able to obtain the resources needed in order to answer their questions. And a very good resource that you can use to provide to parents, that you can obtain and then relay to parents, is usually through your special education teacher, your special education department, as well as your administration. You can always ask those questions, because it's better to provide correct information and have to go through various mediums in order to get it than to provide incorrect information and being liable for whatever the parent understands that their child is going to receive in terms of services. So, going back to our workshop, point, we're going to do another little activity. So now that we've kind of gone over the difference between an IEP and a Section 504 plan briefly, we're going to now play a little game, and it's called Section 504 IEP. In this little game, what we're going to do is I'm going to read you two different scenarios, and you're just going to tell me whether you believe that if the scenario calls for a Section 504 plan or whether the scenario calls for an IEP. And I'll give you a few seconds at the end of the scenario just to get an idea or to think about it, and then we'll discuss it together. So, the first scenario involves Troy. So Troy's a new student at Bellevue Elementary School. His parents have explained that Troy's been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Because of his condition, Troy must take his insulin at 1:15 p.m. every day. Troy's school has devised a plan in collaboration with Troy's parents and Troy's healthcare provider that describes Troy's diabetes care regimen and identifies his healthcare needs. The school has also trained all school personnel who encounter Troy on a daily basis in basic diabetes knowledge, have received training in blood glucose monitoring, administering insulin, ketone checks, and developed an emergency care plan, for Troy's condition. Bellevue administrators have also created a detailed schedule with the school nurse and Troy's parents of meal and snack times. Does this call for a Section 504 plan or an IEP? I'll give you just a few moments. Okay, so by now you should have had a chance to think about it and reread the scenario. So, what do we all think? Well, if you guessed a Section 504, you are correct. So Troy's condition does not require special education in order for him to progress in school. The measures taken are simply accommodations that adhere to the requirements of his condition. So basically what that means is that Troy's condition, though it is medical, though it has been diagnosed, it doesn't impede on his ability to learn. So he can remain in regular education classes, he can participate just as all of his other classmates do. The only difference is that he must go in order to get his insulin checked and to maybe have a snack just to balance his blood glucose levels. So, the next scenario, we have Lily. Lily, a fourth grader, was recently diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. As part of her plan, she takes classroom tests in a secluded room in the school's library that is free from overstimulus and distraction. She is unable to process information in large quantities and reads at a first grade reading level. Lily is also defined as hyperactive and is permitted to walk around the classroom at certain periods of the day and run errands for her teacher when necessary. Lily sits next to her teacher, and her assignments are modified so that she is obligated to complete smaller portions than the rest of her classmates. She also reads texts in the form of audiobooks. Does Lily require a Section 504 or an IEP? I'll give you a few moments. Okay, so what do we all think? Well, if you guessed IEP, you were absolutely correct. So, Lily's condition is defined as one of the 13 disabilities under IDEA, so autism, and significantly impacts her ability to perform and learn in general education classrooms. Remember, she had to have a lot of different modifications. So, in order to take tests, she has to go to a secluded room, and that room has to be quiet. There can't be people walking around. A lot of times schools will dim the lights so that the student doesn't have an overstimulus of light and distraction. And we're going to talk about some overstimulus in just a moment. We're going to visit a video that I found so that you can kind of get an understanding of what a child with a specific disability has to go through. That way you can further understand what they go through on a daily basis as well as their families, and that will transition us into our next topic. But going back to Lily's scenario, she also is unable to process information in large quantities. So what might be a normal workload for her peers might be an immense workload for Lily, and it might take her several nights to complete certain assignments that might only be assigned to her peers for a day. And not only that, she reads at a first grade reading level, so her comprehension of the material that she's being given that may be used for homework or that may be, independent work for classroom study, it may be several minutes or even, actually a large amount of time before she can comprehend what is being asked of her. And because Lily is hyperactive, she has to move around in order to relieve her overstimulus. She does run errands and she's permitted to walk around the classroom. So that is a modification that needs to be accommodated for Lily. And of course, in order for Lily to stay focused, she sits next to her teacher, and also if she has any questions, her teacher is right there, and it just would create a less stressful environment for both parties. And of course, because of the workload and the difference in the amount of workload that she can handle in relation to her peers, it's modified so that she can complete smaller portions over a period of time, and because of her lower reading levels, so that she can keep up to the best of her abilities with her peers, she's also permitted to read audiobooks. So that definitely would constitute her being given an IEP, and it would look a lot like the one that we just looked at in the previous activity. So this is the video that I would like to show you. Again, it gives you a little bit more insight as to what's this particular child with the disability, and it is autism, goes through or may encounter as overstimulus just from what we do. That might not seem like much, just going out and experiencing the world. It is completely different for a child with a disability and their family, and this is just one example of that. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the link here so that we can get started. And this was actually a video that was conducted by the National Autistic Society. So here we go.
Six, seven, 8, 9. Take my hand. I'm not naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
So now I wanted to facilitate a discussion about that video because I feel like it's so important to understand that not only was that video just an example of what a child goes through or what they could go through, on a daily basis, something as simple as going to the mall could trigger so much overstimulus where we have the capability, um, without a disability, to kind of prioritize the stimulus that comes to us. So if we're focused on one thing, 10 million things could be going on around us, but it doesn't affect us because we're focused on that one thing, and everything else becomes secondary. Whereas an autistic child, an autistic individual, they oftentimes do not have the capability to do that. So you're getting a million different stimuluses all at once. And this makes it very difficult for them to just go out and perform daily tasks and imagine what type of accommodations parents have to make. So, when we are talking about building relationships with parents, facilitating that conversation, finding out what is in the best interest of the child, we have to understand that we are not experiencing life as they do. We do not experience life as these parents and their children and their families do. So, the most that we can do is educate ourselves through parent interactions, through resources, about what we can do to make the child's experience in school better. So, this leads us to talking about parent collaboration and what happens when parents are faced with this certain situation of having their child be diagnosed with a disability. So, part of what we do as educators and service providers to parents includes recognizing that the way they respond to us may be influenced by the reaction to their child's disability. So, the way that they respond to it could be a variety of things, but these three things are the main reactions that parents do have when they find out that their child has a disability. So some parents feel grief about their child's disability. This could be, it's a sorrow for the pain that they're or discomfort that their child may have to experience. So again, by watching that video and just seeing what that child had to go through, the stares that they received from people just thinking that, he was acting out, and, the parent didn't know how to parent their child, but it was really so many stimuluses happening at once, or stimuli happening at once. Just being the parent and realizing that that is what your child faces on a daily basis, that could be very, very, very disheartening, and it could be very hard to cope with. Sometimes it's the sadness for themselves because of the added stress on their family, having to make those modifications, having to change their entire life just based off of their child's disability in order to make their child's life more comfortable. It can be very, very stressful, the financial aspect of it as well. And that can be a very big stressor on a lot of families, just being able to either medicate the child or have, resources available to the child that may cost money. Sometimes, unfortunately, it is the sense of loss of what the child may not become. So, a lot of times, there's this very negative connotation with disability. And when parents are told, your child has this, or your child is diagnosed with this, or your child suffers from this, it can create this sense of, what if? I'll never know. They won't be able to do this. So will my child ever get married? Will they ever be able to create social relationships? Will they ever go to prom? Things like that. Those are big things that parents think that they are losing when they find out that their child has a disability. So grief, however, it may be temporary, or it may be a long-lasting experience that these parents go through, and you have to be cognizant of that when you're talking to them, because they might realize that nearly every day of their lives are different from others, and they experience the sense of hostility because their child is not experiencing what they deem normal children go through or what they experience. And they have that right to grieve about their child it's a right that we need to respect. Another reaction that parents may have towards their child is ambivalence. So it may occur as parents attempt to confirm that their condition is not temporary or fixable. Um, they just want to try to determine what's best for their child. What are the best options, both educationally, functionally, and as they ponder how their child will live, into adulthood, those are questions that they want to know about. They just want to know, hey, this isn't something that we can fix. What do we do now? So the decisions that the parent makes are oftentimes difficult, and they continue throughout childhood, adolescence, sometimes throughout adulthood. So they often attend meetings with different school personnel, and they just want information. They just want to intake as much information that they can. And oftentimes these aren't explained. They just are receptive to information. They want all of it, and they just need to know how to move forward from it. The last one, often known as cognitive coping, but it is optimism. So these are the parents that say, my child is my child, just like any other child, and I love my child as my child. And she might have this disability, but she's also funny and caring and kind and clever, and she can get into trouble just as other children do, and she can achieve things just as other children do. She's just like everybody else, except this disability makes her unique. And that is a very admirable way to approach the situation, and I wish a lot more parents would approach the situation this way, because this situation, it's not a death sentence for your child. It's not an end of the road for these parents' children. So while there are many families like this one, there are still families that do go through the grief process, and they may be ambivalent towards the situation, and those things may be temporary. They might not, but ultimately we strive to obtain a sense of optimism in these types of situations, as well as a collaboration with our parents. So parents may work diligently to optimize their child's education, and they're hopeful about their child's future. So they also work closely with educators to develop ways and strategies to optimize their child's learning experiences. So the responses can vary based on how the parents told. So I recall there was an instance um, in one of my classes that I've taken in the past, where a mother, she has a son that is low functioning autistic, and what that means is it takes a lot for him to accomplish just basic daily tasks. He can't go out and do the same thing as other children because he suffers from a severe overstimulus. So lights have to be off, low noise. When his parents talk to him, they have to be a whisper. He just cannot be receptive to just this normal way of speaking as we're doing right now. So the doctor, when he told the mother this, she was told, oh, your son is retarded, and there's nothing we can do. And I think that she was very, very reluctant to receiving services from anybody because she just didn't feel like anybody was on her side. Cultural influences as well. Some cultures view, disabilities um, as a gift that was bestowed upon their child, and they look at it very positively, whereas other cultures, it's a very negative situation. Also, what is the financial situation of parents? Do they feel like they are financially able to care for this child in a way that is optimal? What resources are they provided? What support do they have? Do they have community support? Do they have other family support, extended family support? Do they have support of the school, support of organizations? So the list goes on and on. And then Also, be sure to promote family-centered practices in your conversations with them. And family-centered practice is something that we are going to talk about in length because I think those are the most important aspects of working with families because it makes the family at the center of what you're doing, and the family knows that they are essentially the driving forces of your research, of the resources you provide, and of the accommodations that you are going to make for their child. So, I have another video that we're going to watch. Um, it's about a 4.5 minute video, and it talks about working relationships with parents of special needs students. So, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start that.
As a teacher, you do not work alone, and in special education, teamwork is key to student success. In addition to working with your school colleagues, you work closely with the parents of your special education students. However, parent communication can be challenging in a variety of ways. It can be hard to find time to connect with all of your students' parents, and when you do, parents can have a very different perspective on school and their students than you do. But it's essential to develop a good working relationship with parents because that relationship can be a great asset to you and your students. How do you develop a productive working relationship with the parents of special education students? Here are some tips to keep in mind. 1. Communication. At the beginning of the year, establish a pattern for parent communication. This pattern should include several important features. Plan to provide updates on students on a regular basis and let parents know the frequency and content of these updates. If parents know they will receive certain information on Friday, they may not feel the need to ask you for that information on Wednesday. The frequency and type of updates you need to provide will vary somewhat depending on your student population, but parents should always know the basic plan. Make clear when you are and when you are not available. Let parents know the best ways and times to contact you. Establishing boundaries at the beginning of the year helps protect your teaching time. For example, you may be available for parent phone calls.
Oops, sorry about that. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, well, I apologize. I did not do that last time. So I'm going to go ahead and just summarize what that video was about. And that actually is summarized in the next slide that I have. So, and developing a working relationship essentially means that you create a medium in which parents can reach you in any way that they choose. So, in a way that is convenient for them, in a way that is reasonable for you, in a way that facilitates positive and effective communication and cooperation from both parties. So, what this means, we're going to go into collaboration with parents, what resources you can use, what ways parents can get involved, and that basically just summarizes the video. So, in collaborating with parents. So while discussing services and analyzing potential resources to meet the needs of the child with a disability, you have to remember, parents know their child best. They know their mannerisms, they know their personality, they know what makes them tick, they know what makes them angry, what makes them sad, what makes them happy. So they possess valuable information about their child, and it'll assist you in identifying the best course of action in your student's developmental and academic plan. So parents may underestimate how much they know or how much they're willing to contribute. And admittedly, a lot of times, educators and administration, they undermine how much parents know about their students. So parents have a right to participate in their child's education by law. They have a right to participate. As an educator, you must recognize and reassert that parents are their child's most important advocate. It is very important that you reassure parents that their information, that you care about what they have to say. Their information provides you with insight as to how to proceed with their child in terms of academic progress, functional progress. They possess essentially the key that you need to maintain a balanced approach to the child's learning. So again, continuing on with this concept, as a school professional, you make family-centered practices a reality when you find ways to effectively collaborate with parents. Some examples of positive ways to partner with parents include homeschool communication, parent conferences, parent education, and direct parent involvement. And we're actually going to break these down a little bit more in the following slides. So we're going to go ahead and start with homeschool communication. So one way to build a positive working relationship with parents is by using informal and formal homeschool communication strategies. So these are things like facilitating communication measures, mediums in which parents can communicate with you. So these could be, positive phone calls that you give to parents at the beginning of the school year. Or that you can distribute periodically, like, hey, just want to let you know this is what, little Bobby's doing, or hey, Susie's been improving on her literacy and reading comprehension skills. I just wanted to call to give you a little update on what's going on with her and what we can do going forward to ensure that she continues to improve. There's also things like sending home an introduction letter at the beginning of the year. So letting parents know who you are, your teaching philosophy, how they can reach you if they need, any information or have questions, comments, concerns for you, explain your classroom goals, so on and so forth. You can also do weekly newsletters, just letting the parents know what their children are doing in class, what they're working on, what projects they're working on, maybe some pictures that you can incorporate if the parents are okay with you sending out newsletters with their child's pictures. And this can be done through paper or it can be done digitally, which I find is a very, very convenient and effective way to ensure that all parents get this. Now, sometimes you're going to have varying mediums as to where you can communicate. If parents don't have access to technology, then you might have to create paper copies or create a different way in which parents can communicate you, and in turn you can communicate with parents. Websites are a great tool you can use as well. You can develop your own website that you can constantly update, maybe a blog. A lot of elementary school teachers, I'm not too sure about secondary education, but I know a lot of elementary school teachers use Class Dojo. It's kind of like the equivalent of a elementary parent-teacher Facebook, where teachers can update information based on the child in the class, what they're doing. Parents can communicate, talk back, comment, and things like that. And it really creates and facilitates kind of like a fun little way and a convenient way that parents can communicate with each other, they can communicate with the teachers, and they can see what's going on in the classroom whenever they feel the need to open the app or open the website and take a look. So moving on, we have parent conferences. Now, in a lot of ways, parent conferences can vary just based on location. So you can choose to have them at the school. Sometimes parents might not be able to drive or get proper transportation in order to. So in that case, then you can talk about maybe modifying the location as to someplace that's closer at a mutually agreed upon location, so on and so forth. So preparing for conducting and following up on parent conferences assists in ensuring that this information is valuable to all parties involved, including those with disabilities. So make sure you're actively prepared for the meeting when it comes. When you conduct it, make sure you're following the proper mannerisms, making eye contact, being open and receptive to questions, and of course, following up after the meeting has concluded. If you need to relay information to third parties, maybe a special education teacher, or if you tell the parent that you will be looking into a certain situation or a certain resource, then be sure that you do that as soon as possible. And then, of course, annotate the important points that were discussed, always, 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 just so you have something for reference and you can go back to just to take a look. Please don't do this while you are talking to the parent. Make sure you are actively listening. because when you are jotting down notes as a parent's talking, it might come off as you being disengaged, and we want to make sure that we are actively listening to the parents as they are talking and being sure that we are relaying accurate, correct, and genuine information. Parent education. Collaboration with parents can be achieved through education activities. So these activities can include, but they're not limited to, professional staff information sessions and workshops. So kind of like what I'm doing right now, if you are all parents, you'd have a professional staff member that would be relaying information based on a certain topic to parents. Parent-led workshops, and these can actually be very, very valuable experiences because parents can provide a lot of information, both personal and researched information, as to what they go through as parents, what their child goes through, what resources their child has, what options are available for parents whose children may have the same condition, and just, providing different support, providing a different medium of support in which other parents can look to, just for emotional, financial, and functional resources. Informational sessions related to topics of common interest, so something like autism, ADHD, how to transition from school to school, life after, grades K through 12, what options you have, those are also valuable as well. So keeping parents as informed as possible ensures that they understand what their child is receiving in terms of services, what they could be eligible for, what they need to be prepared for in terms of future endeavors for their child. So this could also be something like inclusive practices, how we intend to include children with special needs into the general education curriculum, the general education, social activities, things like that. Those are going to be common areas of interest, especially for parents whose children do have a disability. Parent involvement. So a lot of times many parents, both with and without children with disabilities, may show an interest in getting involved at their child's school. So they can do this in a variety of different ways. They can tutor, they can maybe do work in the office, they can supervise field trips, they can help out in the library, they can help out in your classroom as being, assistants, or they can come in for weekly readings and just be a guest that reads to the kids. And the all-time probably most known is the PTA meeting. So just getting involved in that parent-teacher alliance and just facilitating that conversation in that type of environment. So this brings us to identifying resources that we can use to assist our parents in making sure that they are making educated, practical decisions for their child's educational future. So we as professionals hold the power over information, possibilities, and outcomes of collaboration with parents. We have the resources, we have the knowledge needed in order to assist these parents. And if we don't, it's our job to find it out. So parents rely on service providers, and that is us. We as teachers are providing a service to aid in identifying and utilizing available resources that best suit their child's needs. So again, that's just reiterating, it's our job to find out what is in the best interest of our students and what their families need, and being able to relay that information in a way that is understood by the parents. So it's your responsibility that families you work with feel empowered in order to obtain a sense of competency and control over the decisions that are made for the child. So these resources can be formal or informal. So formal being like organizations and academic resources, informal being like neighbors, communities, support groups, things like that. And they can vary based on the level of involvement. So you can have parents who are super involved in these resources, or just involvement extending or reaching the capacity of just having it in their back pocket if they need it. So you should always be receptive to questions or concerns that parents may have about the suggestions of resources that are provided to them. Always be willing to answer questions and ready to answer questions. If you don't have the answers, just let them know that you will find the answer and come back to it. Do not provide inaccurate information if you are not 100% sure. It is better, again, to go and find the information and bring it back than to provide inaccurate information and then be held liable for the information that you provide that was inaccurate. Your research will be conducted through a variety of mediums, including but not limited to web-based research, colleagues, community partners, organizations, school references, neighbors, nonprofits, again, organizations, churches, so on and so forth. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here. And I wanted to briefly go over the handout that you all have received. Now, this could be something that you utilize in your classrooms that you make copies of and hand out to your parents. And this is a parent-teacher collaboration guide. So what it means to have a family-centered practice. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. So taking a break from the actual workshop, I'm going to go into this activity. So just talking about what are family-centered practices. And I'm going to zoom in here. Just so we have that. So these family-centered practices, they're based on the notion that the outcomes are best for students when their families' perspectives are respected, their families' inputs are sincerely sought, and school professionals view their job as helping families get the information they need to make the best decision for their children. So basically what this means is really taking our students' parents' input, their opinions, any information that they're willing to provide, taking that into account and being genuine in how we incorporate that into our plans and goals for their children. So while this approach is widely supported, implementation of these practices means possessing an unbiased approach towards families and recognizing that their goals for their child may not always align with yours. Your understanding of varying perspectives is critical, as families may view education differently for a variety of reasons. So cultural affiliations could definitely impact how a child's family responds to your suggestions. Another could be the financial situation. Maybe they think that that resource might be too expensive. Maybe they might think that, they can't participate as much as they want because they have to work to pay bills. And the child capabilities, maybe because they've been told for so long that their child is not capable of reaching the potential that we think they can and that we know they can, the parents might be hesitant to invest in practices or resources that might be deemed useless by them. So on the side here, I just have a little bit of snippets that you can take with you. So decisions that are made for the child should be parent-driven. Parents need to possess the empowerment that they need in order to make educated decisions for their child, because in the long run, we're not going to be there for the next 12 years in reality for them to use as a resource. While they still can, it's better that they know how to find resources, or they know of organizations where they can find those resources. And that's where shared problem solving comes in. That's the basis for many of the collaborative activities that we as professionals undertake on behalf of students with disabilities, and what we need to teach our parents as well. So parent involvement in education is key to working collaboratively. We have to relay that information in a way that parents can understand. If we cannot do it, we need to ensure that we have another resource there that knows how to do it. And establish a variety of ways in which parents can keep in touch with you. Various different mediums: phone, email, class dojo, face-to-face parent-teacher conferences, PTA meetings, the list goes on and on. You just have to find one that is practical for that parent. Key components of family-centered practice include engaging with family members to understand their lives, goals, strengths, challenges, and developing a relationship between the family and the practitioner, or the family and us, or the family and the speech pathologist, basically the service provider. We need to work with our families to set goals, see what the families want their child to accomplish, what we want their child to accomplish, and try to get those goals to a place where they align with one another and they complement one another. Strengthen capacity and make decisions. So, helping the family make decisions, letting them um, absorb and conceptualize the information that we're providing, and then allowing them to make the ultimate and informed decision regarding their child. Providing individualized, culturally responsive, and evidence based interventions for each family. Respecting the culture, respecting what the family spiritually and culturally wants for their child. Creating a unique plan that's based solely on that child's needs, capabilities, and goals. And then providing evidence based intervention, what has been proven to work for each family. And then linking families with collaborative, comprehensive, culturally relevant, community-based networks of supports and services. Again, support groups, organizations that cater to the education and the advocating of a specific disability that's relevant to the child and their family. So what we need to do is understand that these collaborations and approaches to family-centered practices will vary depending on the family that you are working with. So due to a variety of circumstances, your interactions with parents sometimes will be successful and satisfying, which is fantastic, while others may be challenging and perplexing. So the more you understand what is behind a parent's thinking, the better prepared you will be to try to work towards a common solution or goal. So you also have to understand that a parent's attitude towards you may be a result of their previous experiences related to their child services in the past. So do not take it personally if the initial meeting is not pleasant in the beginning. The more you reassure parents that they have a say in their child's education and implement practices in which they can collaborate with you, the more the experience will likely transform into a positive one for all parties involved. So this handout you can use for yourself, for other teachers. You can help educate family members on what family-centered practices are, just so that you can reaffirm that you are dedicated to making sure that that family or the family that you're working with or the families that you encounter are informed about what you want for their child, that you're dedicated to ensuring that they are well educated about what services their child is eligible for, and that they are confident that they can find resources that they need in order to ensure that their child is receiving all of the accommodations that they possibly can. So, going back to the workshop, these are some local resources that you can use. Now, I'm not just going to list them, we're actually going to click on each one, and I'm going to briefly describe each one to you as well. So we are going to begin with Best Buddies. So we're going to go ahead and click on that link. Wait for it to load here. Now, I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. So Best Buddies, their mission is to establish a global volunteer movement that creates opportunities for one-to-one friendships. So, and also incorporating integrated employment and leadership development for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So this is what their website looks like. This is where you can look at their vision, the impact, some history, what programs they offer, what missions are. You can get involved, you can volunteer, advocate. So you have a variety of different options that you can use in order to participate in this organization. So the next one that we are going to look at is Family Ties Nevada. Okay, I'll go ahead and Google it. Sometimes these links want to work and sometimes they don't. I tested all of them, but sometimes they just don't want to work. So, we have Family Ties in Nevada. Oh, typo, I put .net, so I'll go back and fix that. So, this is a resource where you it's basically a nonprofit. It serves people with disabilities and supports their families. So you can look at their mission, you can look at their team, and then you can look at ways to get involved here at the bottom. And you can comment and write your name. They'll contact you and give you ways that you can get involved. So another really, really great resource that you can utilize in order to get involved and learn more about a specific disability that your child may have or that your student may have. So Opportunity Village, that is a pretty well-known one, especially here. We know of them from the Christmas show that they put on, as well as some Halloween stuff. But they actually work in making sure that people with disabilities and individuals with disabilities have integrated work opportunities. So they have different programs that basically try to facilitate an environment in where people with disabilities can have as normal, quote unquote, of a life as possible. So it gives you fun facts, an overview of what they do at Opportunity Village, tells you about them and how you can get involved, and of course, different contexts and location where you can go and explore and learn more about what they do. Now, I have actually worked with Nevada PEP in the past, and they are a great organization. It's basically a parent training and information center, and I would recommend this to families who have children with disabilities, because this is kind of like your one-stop shop for family support services. So it helps to increase opportunities at home and the community, foster school success for children with disabilities, and it also includes those who are at risk for having serious emotional disturbances, their families and service providers. It's an education-based organization, and it prides itself in empowerment activities. So it provides referrals, conflict resolution support, individual assistance, parent mentoring, and advocates, and training workshops for parents where they can get more information about their child's specific disabilities. So different training calendars, they can go here, they can look at what's being offered, what webinars, even things that are in Spanish, which is an awesome, awesome, awesome thing to have. Especially because here in Nevada we do have a large Hispanic population. So this is a great resource that can be used for families who have children with disabilities. So Autism Speaks, that's of course primarily catering to individuals with autism. So basically their mission is to bring the autism community together and urge the government and private sector to listen to their concerns and take action to address global health crisis that exists with individuals with autism. So basically it looks at the research aspect of autism. It even has a families and adults tab, so you can find a local resource in your area. So if we go to Nevada, and it'll give us different types of resources that solely are relevant to individuals in Nevada. So how awesome is that? Then we have DSOSN, which stands for Down Syndrome Organization of Southern Nevada. So basically, they want to bring knowledge to the public by promoting a positive understanding of Down syndrome in the community. They want to provide information and education for families and individuals affected by Down syndrome. And they want, ultimately, for individuals with Down syndrome to be accepted in the community and respected for their own abilities and contributions. So again, there are different resources here, just where parents can go to learn more about Down syndrome, what early intervention is, education, new parents with a child with Down syndrome so they can get, educated relatively early on in their child's life. And then we have FEET. And I've also worked with FEET, which stands for Families for Effective Autism Treatment. So this this organization here, they provide a variety of different resources. So they have IEP educational advocacy supports, iPad programming for nonverbal kids, parent mentoring programs. There's even a parent night out event that goes on monthly where parents can drop off their child with autism and their siblings. They just have to range from 5 to 17. And there is a sports social for about 4 hours where it's a 2-to-1 volunteer ratio. All the kids will enjoy, friendships, games, crafts, more. There's lots of different events that they put on. And different resources that you can use. There's Spanish support meetings. You can look on the calendar for more events. There's just an endless amount of resources that's available for this group specifically that deals with individuals with autism. There's even hotlines that parents can utilize for English and Spanish versions, and up-to-date website information, libraries, quarterly applied behavior analysis training. There's also prom that's utilized through this resource where individuals who have overstimulus can go to prom and enjoy themselves with their friends. So really, really love this organization. They are fantastic. So Muscular Dystrophy Association. This again just educates parents on muscular dystrophy, what it is, more information and resources that they might utilize for their child and what they need, science, how to care for a child with disabilities such as this, getting involved, so being able to participate in an event, becoming a partner, donating, and just telling you a little bit more about the organization. Special Olympics, very, very popular organization. I've actually volunteered with them, and with their track and field team, so they are awesome. They basically create an outlet for individuals with a variety of different disabilities, different spectrums of disabilities to get involved in sports and organize sports and being able to compete. And they do always accept volunteers. They have different sports that you can participate in: softball, basketball, swim, track and field. So there are a variety of different ways that you can get involved with this particular organization. They are very, very big. I believe they're in all 50 states, so if you move somewhere, you can always still go back and get involved with them. Now, UNLV has a Disability Resource Center. It's not just exclusive to students. They have a lot of different accesses and panels and brochures that you can use just for general education. So a lot of different things for going beyond just the regular primary, secondary education setting, being able to learn how to transition, understanding your FERPA rights, supporting your child, things like that. So that's also another resource that's available here in Las Vegas. And lastly, Miracle League of Las Vegas is literally just a comprehensive list and a brief explanation of all of the different types of events that you can take place in for people with disabilities. And there's just a lot of different community resources that are available, and it provides that comprehensive list for you. So you can literally go down the list, find something that's related to your child's disability or your student's disability, and you can basically just click on it and it'll take you to that resource. So very, very awesome. So that's just a short list of local resources. That last one, you can go on there and just find whatever you're looking for. So in summary, we're going to talk about just going back over the objectives that we talked about in the beginning. So creating an inclusive and supportive environment for parent involvement. So you now possess a general knowledge of academic and community resources that are available to your students with special needs and their families. Please ensure that parents feel that their ideas and opinions matter and are valued. They know their child best. Never, ever forget that. Encourage ongoing communication by offering various methods of which to communicate with parents and provide information and times in which they can contact you. And again, a variety of different ways you can do that through email, through phone, face to face, class dojo, whatever is convenient and reasonable for you, and also what the parent prefers, as long again that it's a reasonable request. Make family-centered practices your priority. Make the parent know, or make the parent understand that they are the driving force behind their child's educational experience and that you need their input in order to create a balanced approach to what resources you can provide to that child, or what resources can be found for that child. Remember that what is in the best interest for the child should be everyone's main objective. Establishing a working relationship with parents fosters collaboration and effective communication so that this objective can be reached. And that concludes this workshop. If there are no questions, I thank you for your time. I would just like you to complete a short ticket out of the door. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to you to build working relationships with your students as families? How will you implement best practices to ensure that you are creating a family-centered approach to your students' educational plan? And what did you take away from, or what did you find most interesting about this training? So those are the 3 questions that I'm going to ask you to complete before you leave today. And thank you so much for your time and participation. And I hope that you enjoyed this workshop and that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.